Yeah, I want to excuse me, support this amendment, and obviously goes over some of the ground in terms of the amendments that.
Number 10.
Well, yeah, but you were speaking to 13 as well, weren't you?
Yeah.
Owen?
No, but I'm just saying, just indicate.
Pardon? Yeah, sorry. In particular, 13. Although I support all of the amendments, but in particular to 13, and it covers some of the same ground that we tried to cover in our amendments 14 and 14 and 15, but particularly 14. And I mean, it would seem the minister doesn't really want to answer this question that is being addressed about these tenants. And by the way, I never used tsunami. I know this has been bandied around a bit, but I know, because I'm dealing with the case that I've mentioned many times in here, that there is a group of real human beings who, as soon as the 5-kilometre travel restrictions, which you linked to the blanket ban on evictions, was lifted, the clock was ticking on their eviction, the tenants in St. Helens Court. And now they are overholding because they have nowhere to go, but they are evicted. And they had protection, which you took from them with that change. And you're saying that you're going to bring in more comprehensive protections. Good. I would like to know, would they protect people in this sort of situation? But in the meantime, there is a group of people I know, and there has to be others out there, and some of that 1,100 and, what was the figure, Owen? 1,122 that are in the system will be similar, in similar situations. And I mean, I do think it is worth considering the logic that is driving some of these evictions, Minister, and why it is even more right that you should provide them with protection against these uncare evictions. And Owen's amendment is an amendment to the Residential Tenancies Act 2004, and I have in front of me a determination order from a hearing of the Residential Tenancies Board that I attended for some of those residents. And it really tells a story. I mean, I was reading over it, I sat through it, and I was just disgusted, frankly, by what happened there. But I just read over it. And, you know, in this case, these tenants are living in an apartment block. They're paying their rent. Their landlord obviously got in trouble, and then a vulture fund came in and bought the apartment block. The first vulture fund tried to raise the rent by 60 or 70%, which would have driven the tenants out. They backed off because the tenants resisted, were threatening to did take the case to the Residential Tenancies Board. So they sort of backed off. Then they put a spurious eviction order in against all the tenants on the grounds that they were going to refurbish. And the tenants rightly made the case at the time, this is a few years ago, that actually they didn't need to be evicted to refurbish the place. It was a ruse to get them out. But they fought that successfully. And then that big American vulture fund, obviously it was getting a bit embarrassing. PwC next door were representing them. It was all a bit embarrassing. I raised it in here. And I don't know, did they subcontract the job of the dirty work of evicting the tenants to another crowd? But then this other crowd, Mill Street Projects, come in and take it over in 2019, based in an address which I actually don't think exists, in Muck Tough Rough or something up in, which is 3 townlands in Donegal. How you can have an address in 3 different townlands, and then an address in Derry, which when you contact, there's nobody ever there, right? This company seemed like some sort of outfit to me, right? But anyway, they take it over in 2019 and try and evict the remaining tenants, many of whom have left at this stage. There was originally 20. Many of them have left because the stress of this is too much for them, right? But others have nowhere to go. So they're still there, and this crowd take it over, and then they issue an eviction notice saying, we haven't decided, this is what they tell in the notice, we haven't decided whether we're going to sell or refurbish, but we want you out anyway. And that ran foul of the Tyrrellstown Amendment, which obviously their legal advisors hadn't sussed out. So they backed off at the last minute because of the Tyrrellstown Amendment. And then a few weeks later, they come back and say, we're not actually evicting 10, because you can't, so we'll evict 8. You know, really credible. Like they're not going to come back and get the other 2 afterwards. So we go to the PRTB with the tenants and Threshold, and we explain what is blatantly obvious, which is that it's a ruse, that they're going to evict 8 because they can't evict 10, and then they're going to come back from the other 2 as soon as the legislation allows for them to do that, which I think is 6 months later. And the cold logic of it, though, is just worth quoting, because the tenants explain this is a ruse, they've done nothing wrong, and then the representative of the landlord just says, I won't mention his name, confirmed he was employed by the landlord company as an investment manager, and it was his job to assess all options for the dwelling with a view to realising the best value. He submitted it was always the landlord's intention to refresh and resell this dwelling based on a commercial decision. That, I won't mention their name again, but a real estate agent had been engaged for the purposes of sale, that the landlord had created an owner management company and reiterated that it was always the company's intention to sell it, following a refresh, which he estimated would take 10 or 12 weeks. Now, in other words, what he is saying very clearly to the RTB is, we bought this place in 2019, and the only thing we ever intended to do was evict the tenants to increase its value, and then flip it on. And that's allowed. That's allowed. Yeah, I'm saying those tenants deserve protection now, because that is a ruthless logic. This isn't the mom and pop landlord that is often referred to as a justification for the lack of protections. This is cold, ruthless, profit-driven logic. These people had no intention of being landlords to these people. They had one intention, and one intention only, is to make profit by putting people out on the street. So my question to the Minister is, why would you not want to take this opportunity to protect them? I mean, that's the question. And I never get an answer to that question. I'd like to know, is it your intention to stop that kind of thing? And if it isn't your intention, why would you not do it now? That is a serious question, because real people's well-being, mental health, having a place to live, not being forced into a crisis situation, depend on the answer that you give to that question.
In relation to Deputy Boyd Barrett, just want to assure him that there are other measures and further protections will be coming forward in the autumn. There are people whose incomes would have been affected, to get to Deputy O'Brien's point, may have had a reduction in income and may find it more difficult now to pay the rent. I'm always at pains to say to people to access the emergency rent supplements that are there also. Not as many people as one would think have actually accessed them. And that's a very simplified process for those who are working, and indeed those who are not, to help them make their payments. And that's why we haven't yet seen a substantial increase, thankfully, of rent arrears either. And I think that is because of the state supports that have been agreed, in fairness, by this Oireachtas, put forward by government indeed. So look, the fundamental part of this bill is to make sure that we're extending the protections further for those who need it most. I would encourage people to look towards the self-declaration there that's with the RTB. I've encouraged the RTB as well to engage in a public information campaign along with Threshold what this is, so people can access it and should access it if they feel they meet the criteria. And the other elements we've covered, I think, in a great deal of detail already at Caherly. So respectfully, I won't be accepting any of the amendments that are tabled in this grouping.